Nice to be back here again.
Yeah.
Sure.
15th time, you say?
Yeah, I came here, I think it was 1983 that I came to New Zealand the first time. First time that I played here, so it's been since those years I've been coming fairly regularly, and in the last several it's actually become almost annual now, so that's very nice. I've gotten re-invitations, some new places, but over all these years and over these tours that I've done, I've played in a lot of places around the country in both islands, a lot of small towns, and I enjoy that. I enjoy coming to the smaller places because those towns rather seldom get performances of this kind. I get a lot of feedback from people saying that they really appreciate that. They don't have to go to a larger center. Yeah. They can get it right there. Pianos vary, of course, in quality, but I'm the kind of person who can play in anything as long as it functions. If the keys work, the pedal works, and it's basically in tune, I can use it. I'm no prima donna that way.
What was the initial draw to New Zealand?
Well, I'd gone to Australia the first time in 1979 because I've been going there every 2 years regularly too, and I think it was in connection with one of those that I stopped here, and I guess I had acquired a couple of contact address or something. I can't fully remember, 100% how that started, but obviously I contacted a couple places, and then I began to be aware that there are more places to contact. I began to be aware of community arts councils and things like that, because a lot of those places that I went to play in were through local community arts councils, So it just kind of grew out of that, basically. So now sometimes I've combined coming here with Australia and sometimes not. Like this trip has nothing to do with Australia. Even last year even though I did go to Australia last year because I go in the odd-numbered years. I had my 19th tour there, and I'm always there a long time. 3 months on the average. I was there almost 4 months. I went from late May till mid-September with 28 concerts. But I was here also in April, but there was a separation of time in between where I actually went back home briefly before going to Australia. So the tours were not joined. Now next year we'll see what happens, because I know I'll be coming here again sort of in April, maybe into May, and that very likely will join Australia because I'm just now starting to work towards that tour. That'll be my 20th. 2017, odd-numbered year again. So like I say, sometimes it's with Australia, sometimes it's not, and this year it's not. It's an entirely separate thing. But now with the fact that I have had a lot of places to contact, now, it's possible to have a tour of some kind every time I can come here.
So you were born in New York?
Yes, I was. I was born in New York. Correct. My parents are they were from Ukraine. My father was a pianist by training originally, but he primarily was a conductor and composer. I mean, he studied in Berlin in the 1920s with very eminent musicians. Arthur Schnabel was one of his piano teachers. He was the Beethoven expert of his time as pianist. Ferruccio Busoni, great pianist and composer at that time. He was his teacher at that time. So he had very, very good training. But he primarily was interested as time went on to be a conductor and a composer, and as a pianist in the role of accompanist. My mother was an opera singer, and they worked in the operas of cities of Kharkiv, then Kiev, and then Lviv in western Ukraine. This was like from about 1927 till the mid-1930s. They also toured together, giving recitals, with my father being my mother's pianist. Well, they came to America in 1937, the first time, has toured, went back, came again. Well, the war started, and they had to start a new life. They ended up in America, and they lived in New York City for a while, where I was born, and my younger brother, Dorian, who's a cellist by instrument, and later became composer also a Juilliard graduate, like me. And then we grew up in a town in New Jersey called Toms River, which is between New York and Atlantic City. My parents had it was a chicken farm. I mean, they were advised, by various people to get financially back on their feet that this was a good business to get into. They'd never done anything like that in their lives. My mother grew up in a village and, knew about that. My father maybe never had seen a live chicken in his life before. He was urban bred. But never mind, they got the farm. It was only for eggs, and I remember very well when they were doing that, and I was helping out. But they also established a music school there. They connected it with the Ukrainian community of Philadelphia, which was about 1 hour away driving. So there was a large community there. My father taught there. He conducted a mixed choir there for many years within the Ukrainian community. He ran a concert series in Toms River for about 25 years or so, until he passed away. And they had private students. We had 5 pianos in the house. We had 4 Steinways and another instrument there. I have 3 of those Steinways now in my home, which I moved there from. And so I lived there, grew up there, and I started studying piano when I was 4. My father started me originally, but then after a very short period of time decided I needed other teachers. So I started to go to teachers in Philadelphia. It was a family thing to go once a week there. I and my brother were excused from school half a day once a week so that we as a family traveled to Philadelphia. We had all the our lessons, and my parents had their activities. And then much later, of course, then I went to the Juilliard School in New York, where I was 2 years in the preparatory division studying privately, and then I went to the regular division, and went there 5 years through a master's degree, which is as far as you could go in Juilliard then. Now, this was before Juilliard moved to Lincoln Center. Right. When they moved to Lincoln Center, they added a doctoral program for performers. We'll call it DMA, a Doctor of Musical Arts. But they didn't have that, so master's was as far as I went.
Where was Juilliard for Lincoln?
They were up near Columbia University. They were on Upper Manhattan. It was 122nd Street and Broadway. So Columbia University was in that same area, just across the street from Broadway. The Jewish Theological Seminary, the Union Theological Seminary were neighboring buildings. Grant's tomb you could see, like in the next block. It was that area. So further up in Manhattan. I was fortunate that I had an aunt who lived within walking distance of Juilliard, so that I stayed with her for a week, and then I would take the bus and go back to my hometown, Toms River, on a weekend. And I did this for 5 years. My teacher there she was the most sought after teacher in those days for young pianists anywhere, Rosina Levine. Her name came up for this reason, in this way, because her student, Van Cliburn, had won the Tchaikovsky International Piano Competition in 1958, which was the first time, an American had won that in Moscow, and it was a tense period in the Cold War. And here was this young kid, 23-year-old kid from Texas, who went and just wowed them. He got a ticker tape parade down Broadway after that. I mean, can you imagine a classical musician getting that? It's never happened since. But he was a huge hero. And so her name, became very much aware among young pianists. And I came just after that time to her. So I credit the majority of my musical and pianistic development, to my studies with her, and to just, and the studies with the other classes and things I had at Juilliard at that time. That these were the most important things to shape me as I was. So that's what I did then. I did a little bit of work at the Peabody Conservatory after that, when I did sort of start work towards a doctorate at that time, which I completed most of, you could say that. But I consider my concerts grew and grew and grew, all these years. I mean, they started within the Ukrainian community first, but they grew and grew and grew. So that up to this point now, I've played in about 100 countries around the world, And I also became a professor of piano at universities. I first went to Indiana University in Bloomington, Indiana, the School of Music, which even then, as it is now, is the largest university music department in the world. I mean, even then, and I was there from 1966 to 70, 1,500 music majors. I mean, I didn't even get to know all the faculty, much less all the students in all the 4 years I was there. Yeah, it's a huge school, and with a very big program. Yeah. Then I went for a year as artist in residence at the University of Cincinnati College Conservatory in the state of Ohio. And then since 1972, from 72 until 2011, I was on the piano and music faculty at Youngstown State University, Dana School of Music, from which I retired in 2011. I'm now Professor Emeritus, but I still live in Youngstown with my family. Wife, daughter, son, and 5 grandchildren. We're all in Youngstown. So it's a city on northeast Ohio next to Pennsylvania. You have 1 hour to Cleveland this way and 1 hour to Pittsburgh that way. And that's been home since 1972. So I did that. I won some important prizes in some international and national piano competitions. The main one, or the one that gave me the most, is when I looked traced from those years when it was the international. I got second prize in the International Leventrit piano competition, which in those days was the most prestigious one in America. It alternated between piano and violin, and it doesn't exist now. Now the most important one, or the most prestigious one, is the Van Cliburn International Competition in Texas, in Fort Worth. I think it's every 4 years. But the Leventritt was the one before. In fact, Van Cliburn had won that also before he went to Moscow. That's correct. And it was in our home. It was in our living room. I still have, I had like one vision of it. You know, I'm sitting at the piano and I'm kind of looking in one direction. There are about 50 people. And I remember one person by name. There was a lady who was sitting kind of behind me a little bit in the easy chair there. She was a friend of the family, but I remember her by name like that. Otherwise, it's just like people sitting there, but about 50 in our living room. I mean, we had two of our Steinways side by side in our living room. So that's where the first concert took place.
And that was you got the bug then, did you? Were you...
Well, you know, it's like people ask me sometimes, like, when did I decide to play the piano? And I tell them, I never decided. The piano chose me. It happened before my conscious period. I don't remember any conscious decision saying, I want to do this. It's like it was always there. You know, and it was a natural thing for me to do. So, no, there was no conscious decision. I also studied a second instrument. Violin was my second instrument. I studied it for 10 years until I went to Juilliard. When I and my brother went for those music lessons in Philadelphia, I also went for violin lessons, as my brother went for cello lessons, because that was his main instrument.
So you had a double chance at the Leventritt then?
No. I was never on any professional level on the violin. It was purely secondary. It was on a completely lower level. But in my earliest years, several times during my piano recitals, I would play one or two violin pieces, and my father would accompany me. And like for the audience, it was a novelty. They were seeing me do something that I would normally not be associated with. Yeah. But it was nothing on a level that you'd call anywhere near professional. It was, I would say, at best, maybe it was a kind of a lower middle level. Maybe this is how maybe I got, but no more. Then I also played the clarinet in the school band. Yeah, because, you know, our bands are very important during our football season to march, you know, and do the show in the halftime period. Yeah. So I did that. I marched, you know, in local parades in the town, and so I'm playing the clarinet, you know. My brother played the trumpet. So, again, on a level that was only suitable for the band. I mean, I played whatever I could manage those marches, and that's about it, you know. But the fact is, it was good that I was exposed to other instruments. Yeah. I mean, even though they were on a totally different level, just doing it, you know, it somehow fills you out as a musician in a different way, I think. Yeah. Just doing it.
Yeah. And you were in singing groups?
Yeah, choral. I was just choral. That's right. As a singer, I'm only a choral singer. I was in high school choirs, and then I was in the Juilliard chorus. The piano students had to be in the chorus because, you know, every music school, no matter what you major in, has an ensemble requirement. Yeah. Now, if you're an orchestral player, obviously you'll be put in the orchestra or you know, a chamber orchestra, full orchestra. But most of the pianists who didn't play in other instruments would be put in the chorus. So when I was at Juilliard, I was in that. The Juilliard chorus, in one of those years when I was in it, actually took part, and so you could say I took part in the concert which officially opened Lincoln Center. Wow. I believe it was in 1961. In September or something. It was a big gala concert. Now, the only unit that was finished, and I heard later it wasn't really 100% finished, but they had to go through the dedication. That was Philharmonic Hall. It was a big gala concert. Leonard Bernstein conducted. Jacqueline Kennedy was in the audience. Other luminaries and so on. It was that kind of thing. And I was in the chorus. That was the dedication concert. The other units were at it later. I mean, the Metropolitan Opera, the New York State Theater, the Vivian Beaumont Library. The Juilliard was the last thing to be finished. Right. I remember going to the site. You know, you could see where the construction site was, and you had these boards, and you could kind of peer through the cracks, and the sign said, "Site of the Juilliard School." And you'd see this big hole in the ground. They hadn't yet started. Later I heard, you know, it took forever for them to do it. There was when they started building it, so a floor collapsed and they had to redo it. There was a strike, you know. When were they going to finish this thing? It was about 1968, you know, which when they finally finished. Because I got my master's in '65, so 60 to 65 were my years at Juilliard in the regular division. So I was not in the new where it is now. There's an excellent music school in New York City called the Manhattan School of Music, which is they have taken over in the old Juilliard building. They are there now. They occupy where I was, so that's where they are. But the move to Lincoln Center was later. So I was involved in the dedication of Lincoln Center, but it was only Philharmonic Hall. That was the first building done. I did some master classes in Europe after that. I attended, because that was my first trip to Europe in 1960. Austria and Italy, that's right. Wilhelm Kempff, was a great German pianist who was, like you could say, the successor to Arthur Schnabel, whom I refer to as my father's teacher. Kempff was the recognized Beethoven pianist. And he invited me to attend his master class in Positano in Italy. This was in the summer of our summer of 1965, and that was the occasion of my very first trip to Europe then. But I did other things. I went then to the other master class in Salzburg in Austria, studied with another very eminent Austrian pianist, Friedrich Wüder. I was in the München and Geneva international competitions, where I was a finalist in München. I got a silver medal in Geneva, and then 2 months later was the Leventritt. So 1965 was like a big year, you could say, for the competitions. Gosh, it's hard to believe that's 50 years ago now. Gosh, my goodness. 51 years. We're in 2016 now, But yeah, but that was the occasion of my first trip to Europe. I gave my kind of official, call it debut tour in Europe in 1968. But I as when you give a debut tour like that, you sort of fund it yourself. You hire the hall. So I played in London, in Amsterdam, in Brussels, in Berlin, in München. And you do it because you want to have some write-ups. It's kind of to build up resumes. You can get good audiences, but it's usually what they call papered audiences, which means the local manager gives out free tickets. You may have a really filled hall, but that maybe 3/4 of them haven't actually bought the ticket. Right. Well, that's not the purpose, of it. The purpose is to play and to get hopefully a good review, and that's what I did then.
Austria, though, must be a mecca almost for classical.
Well, it is. Well, of course, and in the late 18th century, beginning of the 19th century, it was the center of the musical world. Haydn, Mozart, Beethoven, Schubert, they all worked in Vienna. Later, it moved to Paris. In sort of by the time 1830s, where Chopin spent most of his time, it kind of shifted. But Vienna was the city of musicians. I mean, if you saw, which I'm sure you saw, the movie Amadeus when that came out. Well, that's all mentioned. That was the center.
Was that still quite palpable while you were there?
Oh yeah, it's always been there. I mean, the Vienna Philharmonic is one of the great orchestras of the world, and there's a lot of musical activity there. There always is. I mean, it's not just them. There are other musicians work there later. Brahms, Bruckner, Mahler. They're all associated with Vienna in some way or the other. So there's a very big tradition to live up to, and of course, they're going to always maintain that. Yeah. So yes, there's still a lot of musical there. After all, it was the center of an empire, so it was logical for all that to be taking place.
Yeah. Who do you consider to be your influences in terms of
Well,
musicians?
Rosina Levin, as I say, my main teacher at Juilliard was, in an overall sense, my main influence when I look back now. Certainly, for specific repertoire, naturally, working with Wilhelm Kempff. It was a 2-week master class, but for Beethoven, because that was the focus of the master class, certainly I would also credit him a great deal. Now, there are a couple other pianists who were kind of models for me in other directions. Arthur Rubinstein, for instance, certainly for repertoire like Chopin, was very important for me. Walter Gieseking, German pianist, was a great master of the French Impressionists, Debussy and Ravel, which resulted in that particular area of classical music. That was sort of my original favored area, music of Debussy and Ravel. And because of that, I learned eventually and played in concert everything for piano that both these composers wrote. And to this day, I'm still trying to emulate in my performances the sound of Gieseking. Of course, you have to have a piano which responds that way. But assuming you do, that's my model, you see. Just for general virtuoso playing, something like Vladimir Horowitz, is an overall virtuoso. So these people had a kind of a specific influence. But in an overall way, certainly my Juilliard studies and working with Rosina Levin was, I would say, definitely was my main overall influence in my development.
You referred to a couple of those composers as impressionists.
Yes.
How is that characterized in that?
Okay, it is because they were doing in a parallel way in music what the Impressionist painters were doing. The painters, as you know, were doing things with light and color to create a shimmery, sensuous effect on the eye. These Debussy and Ravel were doing this with harmonies to create a sensuous effect on the ear. And the music is often kind of fragmentary, ambiguous, subtle. It's different than the music of the Austro-Germanic tradition. Mozart, Haydn, Beethoven, and others. You're drawn into the harmonies. When I talk about it, before I play those pieces, I speak of the harmonic colors as being iridescent, and I describe it like when you drop oil in water and they get those shimmery colors. Yeah. It's what the harmonies do, they shimmer. So it is a parallel thing to what the painters did. That's why the term Impressionism is correct, but it occurred in music later than it did in painting, because in painting we're talking about 1870s, 1860s, 70s, 80s in painting. Here we're talking from the mid-1890s to about the beginning of the First World War, with the first decade of the 20th century being the peak decade for both of those composers.
So who would be their opposites, I guess?
Well, I mean, as the 20th century got going, when you had music like Arnold Schoenberg coming out with a 12-tone system, totally distant, that would be such a different world of sound. Even what Stravinsky was doing, the neoclassic music of Prokofiev, Stravinsky and others, with a kind of a drier, brittle sound, that was a different direction. This was soft and subtle, kind of washed over you. You had a little bit of sound came one ear and kind of, you almost couldn't grab it as it moved away through the other ear. It's a whole different, it's a softer kind of music. Softer, and most of this music has descriptive titles, so what we call program music. Not an abstract title, because when you say prelude or sonata, that's an abstract title. Right. But when you say something like the Sunken Cathedral or Reflections in the Water, that's a descriptive title, and the music does it.
Where have been the most responsive places?
Oh gosh, that's hard to say. My theory, which gets proven over and over again correct, is that virtually every place has appreciative people. They may not be large in quantity, but they appreciate hearing your performance, and they're enthusiastic. So to say enthusiasm, it's hard really to say to actually answer that in a very, very particular way. Audiences are they respond virtually everywhere. They really do. Yeah. They really do. Some may be a little more demonstrative, up front than others. Yeah. I remember when playing in India, for instance, and I've done about 6 tours in India, that, sometimes, you think at first, if you don't know this custom, that it's almost like they'll applaud, but you think that's very perfunctory, and they even stop before you walk off the stage. But no, you're misreading it when you think that. That's sort of the normal way of saying they really liked it. They're not out there giving you a standing ovation. It's just not their way. Yeah. But when you understand that, then fine. Yeah. You know that they're still appreciating what you're doing. But every place that I've played has people who appreciate it, and like I say, I got a lot of feedback coming to smaller places that tell me that they're glad that I did that. I came to them, and they didn't have to travel to some larger area to do this. Yeah. And I like that too. I like when people sit relatively close to me. And I tell this often when I talk to the audience, and I always talk to the audience about what I play. So it becomes informative, and they also see you as a person, But I tell them that I often like playing in a smaller kind of venue because we're close to each other. It's different than being in a large theater where you may hear just fine, but you don't see very well because you may be behind a pillar or you may be just too far. It's only the detail. Here, we're close to each other, and they can experience something, I think, in a little different way. I sometimes joke and say, well, if you're sitting really close, why don't you just reach over and help me out?
Do you compose as well?
No. That is a different talent all its own. Well, when I was about 12, I wrote a couple little pieces, preludes and so on, but no. Composition is a talent also. Now, my father was a composer. And of course, you can major in composition in a music school. Well, you have to have also talent to show the committee that you have some quality in what you're submitting. No, I don't have that. I'm happy enough just interpreting works written by others.
Do you come across composers who can't play?
Oh, there are many who can't. This is the thing, with composers that, it's very hard to get performances. The best thing for a composer to have, if they can have it, is to have a university position in a school of music, because if they don't get performances anywhere else, at least they could get it on campus. At least they can have some performances there. Now, if you're a performer and can play your own compositions, or if you write the kind of compositions that you can perform, then you have another leg up. But otherwise, a composer is always dependent on trying to have interest someone else to play their piece. Right. So but there are many composers who are not performers, or at least not performers certainly on what they're writing. And they have to consult sometimes. They often have to consult with a player, saying, is this actually physically possible on this instrument? I envisage this. Can I write it this way? Is this possible or not? And then the performer will actually have to say, well, I think if you divide it this way or something, or maybe omit these two notes, we can do it. But if you left it this way, no, it's not really feasible. Because they don't know, because they don't play that instrument. Right, see? Oh, there are lots like that.
That's interesting.
It's lots like that.
Something that had never occurred.
Oh, yeah. But let's say if you're a pianist and you're writing piano music, well, then you'll know how to do it. But if you're a pianist and you're writing something for the oboe and you don't know the oboe technique, obviously you're going to have to consult with an oboist just to say, is this actually physically possible on the instrument? You don't know that.
When you started at Youngstown,
Yep.
what were you teaching there?
I was teaching piano, applied piano for the most part. Later I started to teach musical appreciation classes. Okay. And so, which I actually enjoyed in a sense more because, and I thought it was actually more important work because this was a course geared to non-music students. This was a course not for the music students of the Dana School of Music, but a humanities thing for, you have psychology students, education, chemistry, whatever. The education students needed it. It was part of their curriculum. But the point is that it was non-music students. So 95% of them knew little or nothing about classical music when we began. And so I would have to teach them some terminology and this and that. And then I wanted to give them a kind of an overview of the history of classical music, the various things about the major periods, who the major composers are, but not just the factual stuff. I wanted them to also have an idea, what is the typical sound of Mozart? What is the typical sound of Beethoven, Chopin? Some of it was me playing live for them. Some of it was recordings. So they would get that would complement the factual. They had a requirement. They had to go to 4 classical concerts in the semester of their own choice, but it had to be a true classical concert. They had enough choices in the area to pick from, and they had to give me a layman's report on the concert. Not just, I went to such and such a concert and I kind of generally enjoyed it. No, I wanted something specific about every piece, every movement, I said, look, you may know nothing about classical music, but you're a listener. You can still respond as a listener. Use your own words. Yeah. You don't have to use the fancy terminology if you don't know it yet. Use your own words, and that's what I want to know. Many of them were attending a concert for the first time in their lives. They'd never been to a classical concert, and I would get things in reports like, I wasn't quite sure if I was dressed right, and I was a little unsure. But when I came there, I was much more relaxed. I saw people like me. Another one would say, I really had to drag my boyfriend. He really didn't want to come, but we went and we enjoyed it. I think we'll go see another one. You opened a door because they had preconceived notions about what a classical concert is. So when I say something that I thought I was doing something more important here, what I mean is when I teach piano, I'm in essence preaching to the converted, right. People in that field. Yeah. But here I'm actually helping to build future audiences in my little way. Because if these people like what they went through in the course, and I got a lot of feedback in student evaluations about that, they would tell their friend, and it could expand. They'd be someone in their own neighborhood and their own towns that could influence other people. Because I read a statistic long ago, quite sad I think, is that only 1% of the population generally supports any of the fine arts, concerts, museums, poetry, whatever. Just 1. And I thought to myself, well, it'll always be a minority thing, but how about if 2% supported? Because there'd be so much more opportunities for everybody if 2%. But we each have to do our little thing to influence people who don't know anything about it and say, try it, it's okay. People have these images from the movies that it's sort of formal and everyone's in white tie and tails. Yeah. And opera, it's always the fat lady who sings. I mean, come on, it says, look at the opera singers of today. They're photogenic like Hollywood actresses, none of that fat lady stuff anymore, So, but that's the image that people have, something to poke fun at. Yeah. But once they experience it, that's what I told them in my introduction, that if you haven't had any of these preconceived notions what classical music is, I even said maybe some of you had bad experiences with those dreadful piano lessons you were forced to take as kids with unpleasant teachers. I mean, maybe that put you off classical music. I say, but it's nothing to do with the music. Once you get to know the music, all this should dispel, and it did. The vast majority of them, they saw that what it was. This was not what they had thought, and that's what I mean. If each one of us can do that and influence people in our own circle, then that minority will increase. So that's why I think that in teaching music appreciation classes, this does. Now, my wife currently teaches as a part-time professor at Dana, and she's teaching those same music appreciation classes. So I occasionally come in, she'll have me come in and give a little guest talk and she did it earlier this semester, so I talked to her students and played just a little bit for them. So I'll do that now and again.
And your wife is a singer?
She is a singer by training. That's correct. And more recently, she's become a kind of a playwright. She wrote a very nice play, kind of a musical narrative based on her own songs. About 30 years ago, she began to write some of her own songs, kind of light ballad style stuff. And she knows enough piano that she could accompany herself a little bit on it. Right. We gave a couple of performances where she did that. Well, there was a local person, a regional, not a local person, but a regional person who was, he's an actor, but also runs a theater company in the state of West Virginia, in Fairmont. It was about 4 hours from Youngstown. And he heard some of her songs, and he was so taken with it that he said that if she would write a play around those songs, he would produce it, and so she did. And it's autobiographical, and she included 15 of her own songs, but she also taught herself, and this took quite a long time, she taught herself the Sibelius program on the computer, the composers use, and orchestrated, these songs. And it went very well. We had a couple of informal performances, then we had the official one, and so we have a DVD of that, of a performance actually done at Dana at the recital hall, and people have been very touched by it. I thought at first it would be kind of a more women's appeal sort of thing, but no, it's actually has universal appeal. People can say, yes, I know someone who, yes, this touches me, I can relate to this, because it has to do with, look, it's really stripping bare family things, but I don't mind, it was what it was, it is what it is, but it's nice. It takes about an hour and 40 minutes. It's in 2 acts, and it's called Sarah's Song. And we're now at the point where we'd like to interest theater directors to sort of put on it. It would have minimal cost to anyone, because she envisages to have 4 actresses and an actor, but it's been done so far as a 2-woman show, one doing the monologue, one doing the songs. Now, my wife has done the singing so far, but she would like to have others learn those songs, and she has them in written form. She has a CD which has her singing it so that someone can hear what it's like. So it's possible to do it like that. So we're just at that point now to try to get it out there, because we know how people can be touched by it, and they were, in tears and everything, and it's just, it's sensitive, and some of the songs are really nice, and as good as some stuff I've heard on anywhere, and so it's a new venture for her creatively. But yes, she's a singer, and right now she is church choirs mainly. We used to do some joint concerts in the long ago past, but her interest has kind of shifted a little in this direction. She's a graduate of the Boston Conservatory, and then she got her master's at Youngstown, at Dana School of Music, much later. So she got that. I like reading, I like traveling, I like movies very much. I watch certain TV shows. I like, the paranormal investigation shows. I watch those. And I belong to Titanic Historic Societies now.
Really?
Yeah. Ever since the James Cameron movie, I got very interested in that, to the point where I actually have joined societies. I've gone to conventions. I'm going to go to the convention in about a month's time, one of them in New Jersey, in my home state. I've acquired a few small but real artifacts of or about Titanic, and now also of Lusitania as well. I did meet the last survivor during a convention in England, Milvina Dean. She's now passed away about 4 years ago, but she was only a baby there, but she was there. She was the last survivor. She showed up at a convention I went to there, and I have a photo with her. We chatted a little bit. In fact, she wanted to hear me playing. There was a piano there, and I was just about to do it, and then we were all called to get a group photograph, and the moment was gone, So, but yes, so that's an interest, I had other interests in the past, in the long ago past. I had other, and they're still there, very much just under the surface. Astronomy was my original interest. History has always been another aspect of history. I used to, when I was still in high school, and even in my early Juilliard years, I was a gun collector. I still have most of my collection. It's just that was a hobby I had because it was another aspect of history. Yeah. So I have these sort of things, But as I say,
Was it just vintage guns that you collected?
no, military stuff, even deactivated machine guns, which we could get, through the mail at that time. This is, I mean, you can still do it, but I mean, the laws are a little different now, but you can still do it.
Mail order.
Yeah, well, deactivated, plugged, plug. They were not operable.
Right.
They were not operable. But later on, it was determined that some could be actually reconverted and so on. So there was the new law passed that they had to be registered, and I did get them registered at that time. So, but it was a hobby. It was a hobby that I had, and then it shifted to other things. So now it's it's the Titanic, two societies that I belong to, so yeah. But I say generally traveling, reading, watching some of these TV programs. These are some of my other interests.
Paranormal
Movies.
investigation.
Yeah, I like that. Yes, very much so. Yes, because I believe there's a lot there that we don't know about. Some very interesting and very reputable people who report all sorts of things.
Ever experienced anything?
No, I've never experienced anything myself. No. But I do know some people who have.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to do
Yeah.
a concert, to a recital for haunted
Listen, and the thing is that the so-called the places where these investigations have done, it could be like a house like this. It's not what you think in the movies. It's some old castle, with someone playing, the Bach D minor, toccata, ta-da-dam, but no, it's not that Dracula stuff. No. It's ordinary houses in an ordinary town. That house just becomes unlivable because there's something there, and it just drives the people out. I mean, these kinds of investigation programs that I watch. Actually, they were long ago, I don't know, 25 years ago. There was a couple. They were known as the foremost investigators of these kinds of things. Ed and Lorraine Warren.
That's right.
You know who I'm talking about.
Yeah.
They came to Youngstown State University 3 times, and I and my wife went to hear them and see them. The place was absolutely packed, and the photos they showed of their investigations so on, absolutely fascinating, to see. We were there 3 times for that. If you saw that movie, it was just a recent movie, The Conjuring, for instance. That was based on a case they did, and the actors playing them, they even said a line that I remember them saying to us. They say, this sound, this is from something that was never in human form. I remember them saying that same thing when they were at Youngstown State, because they spoke to college audiences.
Yeah.
They lived in a town. Now, he's passed away already. She's still living. Lorraine Warren is still living. She's in her 80s somewhere. They live in a small town in Connecticut called Monroe, near Bridgeport. My godmother lived in that town, and I remember as a very, very young, my family, we used to go and visit my godmother. I wanted to ask them at one of their visits, whether they knew my godmother, because they were in the same town. But there was such a crush of people when I came. By the time I got to the front, they were already gone, and I never had a chance to ask them, about that. But they lived, and she still does, and because she maintains a museum of various objects they've picked up from these various places they've investigated. They keep them under glass, or they keep them under, and they still tell people, see, don't touch these. There's still possible something there, So she's maintained that museum there. So who the Warrens are, and I'm saying, so they came through Youngstown 3 times, and we went to hear them.
Is that where the museum? Is that where that haunted doll?
Yes,
is?
Annabelle. Correct.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking
I
about.
do.
That's exactly right.
Oh man.
I haven't seen the museum, but that's where it is. That's correct. So you know what I'm talking about.
Try and reach out to Lorraine Warren and ask her if
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I probably should. Yeah, I probably should. Yeah. I'd like to see that museum myself if I could. So I do watch these. We have them on our Sci-Fi channel and also occasionally on our Travel channel. Ghost Hunters, Paranormal Witness. There are several other names like that. So yeah, I do watch those when I can. So it's in these kind of other interests. You need to have other interests. If you're involved in a particular field, you generally want to do something else. So, for instance, being that I'm in music and I give concerts and all that, for me, I don't want to just say, "Oh, I'm going to go and hear another concert." I'd rather go to a movie, go to see a movie and just do something else, because I'm already doing this. So I want to do something else. Yeah.